value of Primo Levi's work, I mean, is beyond question. I think for many, many different reasons. It has been more and more perfected, and I think particularly, The Drowned and the Saved is a masterwork of linguistic, how should I say, taming of very, very violent and painful thoughts and ideas. But I think much beyond that, he is extremely important, on the one hand, as a survivor describing for the generations that follow and that cannot imagine how terrible the times were in the camps. So he speaks with an authority and an authenticity that is in itself just mind-boggling.
Per molti anni Levi è stato limitato dall'etichetta del testimone, cioè non si è percepita la straordinaria qualità della scrittura di Levi, che non è un di più, è la cosa stessa, cioè la scrittura è il luogo in cui tutto diventa vero e necessario. Ecco, la qualità letteraria di Levi ha stentato molto ad emergere. Levi fa delle analisi di cui non è mai soddisfatto e che perfeziona continuamente, che sono assolutamente perfette per interpretare una vasta gamma di comportamenti delle società di massa, delle società contemporanee. Quindi è un'opera perfettamente attuale.
In April 2008 in Torino, the local authorities, the Jewish community, the Compagnia di San Paolo Foundation, the International Book Fair Foundation gave birth to an important study center named after Primo Levi. And we plan to have every year, at the beginning of each academic year, one lecture named after Primo Levi, because we think that we have also to have a public activity, and especially for the young people and the students in Italy. And this is what we are doing in this moment. The symposium held in New York in this October here marks the beginning of a close cooperation with the New York Primo Levi Center, which has been established long ago and has a very strong effectiveness and worked so much on Primo Levi.
The real first translation has been very important to him because, as it has been said, was a translation into German. Fearing his book would be watered down or made more soft, Primo wrote a very aggressive letter to the publisher, warning him not to change or omit even a word.
Making some research in Berlin, I found an article by the translator called Joachim Meinert that tried in the 80s to translate Levi in Eastern Germany. He could not do that. Well, going back to the documents say that Levi was a sort of Zionist sympathizer, and they refuted the publication because Levi failed, according to the censors of Eastern Germany, failed to represent the communist resistance within Auschwitz.
It was indispensable to translate this book for the wider Arab and Muslim audience. So it was that If This Was a Man was translated for the first time into Arabic and also into Persian.
The book was translated into Arabic and Farsi and has been made available free of charge on the internet. We had bought the rights from Einaudi, the publishers in Italy, and so far it's been quite successful in terms of the people who've downloaded it, both in Farsi and Arabic, and have read and commented about it. I think the internet provides a very powerful tool of cultural outreach. People across the Muslim world are increasingly having access to the internet and can find information on the internet about topics that interest them, and that provides an opportunity for projects like the Aladdin Project, which seeks to reach a very wide audience in different countries where people might have difficulty in obtaining the paperback books.
We also know that in Iran, at least, the book, as well as Anne Frank's diary, has been published in samizdat format in paperback. The ideal world to which we're looking for is a world where if you ask a Muslim child who is a Jew, he would respond in a way that would be free of stereotypes and myths. And if you ask a Jewish child who is a Muslim, he would also respond in a way that would be free of myths and stereotypes.
He had doubts that with the subsequent generations, the knowledge and the impact and the emotional proximity would get lost, particularly among successive German generations, that they may just turn away from a past that no longer affects them. And this is where I felt that this is not the case, that German youth, which is now more or less the fourth post-Holocaust generation, is very much aware of what has happened. They are not emotionally involved because it's too far in the back, but for that very reason they are intellectually involved.
Young German readers do not forget. This is very good news. In Italy, the situation is quite different.
On one level, people just when they hear about Primo Levi, they're just concerned and they don't want to get into that, because it is that reminds them of a certain part of the history that they've studied, or even the culture that they have seen on television that is associated with something that something like the burden of the past. On the other hand, there is a keen interest on Levi, and most of, specifically among young Jewish students. The way I try to teach Primo Levi is just starting not from the famous icon of the Holocaust, but from the writer. I remember one that was a sort of hipster, really, the way his appearance was funny. And he said, well, but my point is, and I wrote in the paper, that you cannot understand Primo Levi if you don't think about Italian tradition. So that's why I started reading Dante after Primo Levi. That was remarkable.
I think Primo Levi is such a wonderful, admirable humanist. And despite all the experiences that he has gone through, he has always kept a core of humanity in the camp and outside afterwards.
Ammiel called Levi the forgiver. However, I think that it's a much more complicated situation because in Levi's work there is a very strong sense of judgment, both in a kind of being a judgmental person, but also in an openness for dialogue. So there seems to be a great conflict between these two positions within Levi, but I think this is one of the most productive parts of his work, particularly his last piece of writing. I am not inclined to forgive because I know no human act that can erase a crime. I demand justice, but I am not able personally to trade punches or return blows. I mean, this was apparently one place where they disagreed, and both agreed that culture or being an intellectual probably mattered only in a very marginal sense. But then Levi says something interesting. He says, it was definitely, this is in the chapter from Drown and Say It, it was definitely not useful in orienting oneself and understanding. On this score, my experience as a foreigner is identical to that of the German Ammiel.
How can we live, since all that has been made in the name of all of us? This is the question that I think we all, the mankind, are keeping always in your mind.